Alright, hello, welcome. My name's Shayna. I'm an astrologer, but today, I'm sure you noticed by the title, I'm doing something very different. We're not talking about astrology at all, but I guess you could say we still are talking about the metaphysical. I don't know what I can say, so I'm gonna say I'm doing a girl's guide to substances. And in this first episode, which I think I'm gonna do more, but who knows. But in this first one, I definitely wanted to talk about LSD or acid. So there is definitely a disclaimer here. This video is for educational purposes only. It's like, I feel like when most people make like substance videos, they just say that, but that's really the only point of this video. I feel like most people that talk about substances online are male, like predominantly. I'm not saying that no girls do at all. Like there are girlies who, what can I say, smoke tea leaves, I guess I'll say. But other than that, not really. And basically what I wanted to do is a video that's like, before your first time trying LSD or acid, here are some like, I guess, tips and tricks or just little things that I would have loved to know going into it. I don't think you have to know anything going into taking this substance, but I think that with specifically LSD and acid, there actually are some things that are really, really helpful to know, especially if you don't have anybody around you that's done it, that's talked about it. And so I'm like your big sister here, basically helping you with harm reduction, helping you have like a safe trip, and just kind of sharing my experience with LSD and acid. I also feel like most people that talk about acid and psychedelics on here are all like major wooks, and it's like their whole entire lifestyle and life is based around this one substance. Obviously, that's not me. However, I have done it, I would say probably about 10 times. I mean, I give or take some, I'm not sure. I haven't done it probably as many times as like the people on here that do it like every day and have completely fried their brain and are like perma-fried. But I've also, you know, I've done it enough to like, I know what it's like, you know what I mean? So let's just get into it. So the first thing that I want to say is acid will find you. You do not need to find acid. If you're coming to this video because you're curious and you're like, I don't even know where to get it, just put out your little feelers. Like, if it's meant to come to you, it'll come to you. And especially because it's such a spiritual drug, if you're really forcing it and you're like, I really want this drug, I want to try it, oh, like, maybe it's not the right time for you and you just need to like sit back, chill out, and trust that it'll find you when it should. Also, it is important to think about like the setting and the person that you receive it from, because honestly, acid is a very spiritual, transformative experience, and the trip starts when you receive it. Because I promise you, even if you take that acid and you store it away for 5 months, the trip started when you grabbed it and it will continue when you take it. So that is something to really pay attention to. Okay, the next thing that's huge that I need to emphasize that I feel like people do not understand about acid, and it's not talked about enough, is the setting. The setting of where you're taking it. Where are you physically when you take the drug? It's so, so, so important. And obviously, like, what's your mind frame, what's your mindset, that will only be exaggerated once you start tripping. It's really important to be familiar and know the location of where you're at when you're tripping. It's easy to get lost, it's easy to get scared, it's easy to make trying to get to a location your entire trip and have that be like, oh, the entire thing, and that's stressful. You don't want any stress at all when you're tripping, especially for the first time. So know your setting, be familiar with it, be comfortable with it, and really be careful around strangers. Just because it's a little bit off-putting to be around strangers and be around like a super public place when you're tripping for the first time. You just don't want to be figuring anything out. This is not the drug to do math equations on. Like, you just want to know your setting, be chill, and stay there. And sometimes just staying in your home can be a little dull. You probably will want to go outside, but you'll want to be somewhere where there's not a bunch of people around, is honestly my guess. Okay, speaking of people, the next huge thing to emphasize is the people that you are with. Even more importantly, maybe, than the setting. Actually, yeah, more importantly than the setting, who are you taking acid with? This is not a party drug. This is not Coke. This is not Molly, where you're all just gonna get along and have fun and see the best in everyone and it'll all be good. No, this is like your group dynamics and your group dichotomies and how everyone feels about each other, good and bad, it will be exposed. This will be highlighted. This will come to the forefront. And obviously no, group of friends is like perfect, happy all the time. But if there's some underlying issue that you kind of are having with a friend, don't trip with them. I would not recommend it because it's just not good for anybody if you're at all have the slightest feeling that you don't want to trip with somebody. Yes, there are flies in here. I don't know what to tell you. I'm waiting for the fly traps in the mail on from Amazon, but they haven't come yet, so let's just ignore it. Like, love will be amplified on acid, but so will hate. Okay, let me say that again. So will hate. If you really don't like somebody and you want to, let's say, throw them off the balcony, when you're on acid, there will be a point when you really actually think about throwing them off the balcony. Okay, so if you have any ill feelings towards a person at all in the back of your mind, just don't trip with them. I remember the first time I tripped, I was stuck on the idea of like how many crimes were committed on acid, and we don't know, because I just feel like emotions are so much more heightened, feelings, and especially because I will say the main thing that I feel about what acid does more than anything is that it distorts time. Especially within the first few hours, it really slows down time and makes you feel and recognize every single second. And so it can feel like sometimes when you're on an acid trip, especially your first one, like you'll never get out of it, and you were never out of it to begin with. And so when you're in that mindset and then you're hating somebody or angry at somebody or hating yourself or angry at yourself or whatever it might be, you don't like where you're at, that will just be ultra, ultra amplified. And you'll feel like it'll just be so much harder to deal with. And I think that people are more likely to act on those impulses of like, I'm mad at this person, I want to do something about it. Now, I'm not saying you're going to throw your friend off the balcony, but I'm just saying that those things, if they're at all in you, they can and will come up, So obviously, yes, love will be amplified. So like, let's say you're wanting to do it with somebody that you're in a relationship with and you really like them and you're in the honeymoon phase, like, that's a really good time to do it. I think it is nice to, if you like, let's say you're tripping in a group, to have one or two people that have already done acid and are comfortable with it, doing it with the people that have never done it. I think two people or a bunch of people that have never done it before, all doing it at the same time, you can easily lose your sense of grounding and your sense of sanity because you don't have that person that's just like, it's kind of nice to have a person just like, just acid. I've done it a bunch of times. Like, there's something very comforting about that, at least for me, because I was like, oh, this person's done it a billion times. They're fine, They don't think it's anything crazy, and it makes you feel less crazy. Because you can feel really crazy on acid. You can feel out of sorts, right? And it can really exemplify mental health issues. So it is really nice to have those people there that are like stabilizers that already kind of know what they're doing, already comfortable with it. That kind of goes into also, don't ever secretly dose somebody. And if anybody has ever like dosed you without you knowing, they are not your friend. They are not a good person. Like, that is such a terrible, terrible betrayal, to not know what's going on, to not understand that you're on acid. I think the most important thing to think about when you're on acid is, oh, I'm on a drug. Like, you just need to keep reminding yourself of that. And so the idea of not knowing that and not having it be your choice to consciously take it is such a betrayal. Never dose somebody. Never ever trust anybody that doses you. Don't ever do that. Don't ever be around people that do that. Okay, moving on. Dosage. Okay, so I've heard this from a few people before where they're like, oh, my friend who's done acid knows that I have a high tolerance to drugs, and they said that, because I have a high tolerance to other drugs, that I should do like 2 tabs, or I should do, more than the normal amount, more than just 1 dose. And no. Nope. That's honestly, I think, the stupidest idea ever. I don't care if you're the world's biggest cokehead and you've done all these crazy ass drugs. I don't even care if you've done a ton of shrooms. Like, I don't care if you've never done acid before. Just do 1 dose. Like, hello. I don't care how much you want to impress a girl by doing twice the amount as her your first time. It's fucking stupid. Right, Broly? It's fucking stupid. It'll be too much for you to handle. It just will be. And if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I did 2 my first time and I was fine, that's cool, but it's just not worth taking that risk to be the cool person that does 2. Also, you'll look stupid when you're like flipping out and acting all wild and everybody's like kind of okay. Now, obviously, all doses are different. Like all acid tabs are definitely not even close to created the same. And pretty much anytime you buy acid, somebody's gonna be like, this has 20,000 hits in just 1 tab. Like they'll say something absolutely ridiculous. Don't listen to them. Just take one, whatever it is, just take one of it. I wouldn't say take half. I would say just take one. He really wants to be in this video. He's like my little psychedelic dog, I swear. Now I'm gonna take you through kind of like what I will call like the stages of acid, because it really actually is easy to break down an acid trip. An acid trip will last about 12 hours. So definitely take your entire day off to do acid. And again, if acid does anything, it distorts time. So don't plan to do acid for the first time and then at 5 p.m. go to some dance class or a college class or go out to eat with somebody. Basically, the breakdown of acid and time is the first little bit is the come up. The come up is probably, honestly, the most enjoyable, like at least for me. It's exactly how it sounds like. You're going from normal and you're just going up, 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 up. It's like on a roller coaster. And it is so fun. Everything is funny. You're laughing your butt off. You're smiling. You're not even aware that it's happening up to a certain point. Like everything's starting to look more vivid. All the colors are looking brighter. Things are happy and fun. It feels almost a little bit like the come up on like Molly or ecstasy, but even like funnier and even more like you're still yourself. You don't lose yourself at all. There's nothing to really worry about here. And it kind of almost does that, I think, to trick you. Like the whole time will be like this. Ah! No, the whole time is not like the come up. So enjoy it while you're experiencing it. I think with any kind of drug, you feel a boom, you know, like doomp, oh, I'm on this now, or doomp, oh, things have shifted and my perspective has shifted and this drug is over now. So you kind of get a little bit of a doomp, and that's when you know you're settling into your first 4 hours. So the first 4 hours of the acid trip after the come up feel like your entire life. They feel like what I mentioned, like you have never not been on acid and you will never not be on it. It really, really slows down and distorts time. The first 4 hours are really the acid trip, more than anything else is. So you want to make sure you're where you want to be once these 4 hours kick in. And then you kind of get a little bit of a dump. And then it's the second 4 hours. The second 4 hours, I think, are actually the hardest because your main trip is already over and the dust is kind of settling. This is where I kind of find you kind of run out of things to do, and I kind of find that I get I know this sounds weird, but I almost get kind of exhausted, like, wow, I've kind of felt this way for a while. Like usually, I'm honestly gonna be real with you guys, I like acid, but I haven't done it in 2 years, and I don't really miss it. I'm glad I did it as many times as I did and stuff, but it's just such a longer drug than most other drugs. And the second 4 hours is where it can get really scary because you can be like over it. The second 4 hours definitely goes a lot faster than the first 4, but it is a little bit like acid is a marathon, not a sprint. Like Molly, Coke, that's a sprint. This is gonna sound weird, but if you're somebody that likes Molly, I think this is the best time to do Molly is right after the first 4 hours, because that's when you're kind of like, you know, if this is the come up of the roller coaster, then the first 4 hours are like, whoom, and then the second 4 hours are like the rest of the roller coaster, but you're feeling a little bit dizzy and a little bit queasy from it, at least sometimes. In my opinion, this is the best time to take Molly, and it is kind of nice to secure like that you're going to have a good trip. Okay, this is going to sound very like Virgo of me. I don't know how else to put it, but I do think it is really helpful for when you take acid to know when you take it, to know the like around the exact time of when you took it, because it is nice because you just lose all sense of time. You're so confused. You don't know what's going on. Okay, and then you have the last 4. The last 4 hours are really when you're coming down, but it's not like a Coke come down where it's like terrible and miserable and you're trying to like evade suicide. No. The last 4 hours of the acid come down are really chill. Like you really just want to sleep, be someplace comfortable, wind down, maybe like play a video game if you haven't yet. Watch a movie if you haven't yet. The last 4 hours, they're really nothing to worry about, I think, but you're still feeling it those last 4 hours. So you can't, it's not like you're gonna, oh, I feel great to go and take a college course now. Like, it's not like that, but it's a lot less stressful. The best thing to do is take the next day off. Your brain isn't really screwed in right. You definitely have fogginess once you're off of acid, and you can have a little bit of trip brain, basically. But let me now talk about like those first, like, I don't know, 8 hours, like what you should plan for in those 8 hours, like the main trip, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing I want to say is it is nice to have a little something planned. Now, nobody wants to have the person that they're taking acid with have a fucking itinerary and tell you what to do. That's the absolute worst idea you could ever bring to that's the worst vibe you could ever bring to the function at this point. Like, don't do that. But it is nice in the back of your mind to yourself be like, oh, if nobody knows what to do, I know that I want to watch this movie. Or, oh, if nobody knows what to do, I'll have the PlayStation ready, and I know that this game will be like a fun game for us to play, and it's all trippy and it's got cool visuals. And to have that set up and ready. I know that when I'm on acid, I'm like, I really don't know how to take care of myself. I don't even know how to like change my clothes or like pick up after myself. Now, that's not true for everybody, but it's definitely true for some people. So it's best to just have everything ready. This is not the time that you want to like set up your PlayStation and like fiddle with electronics. So no, you shouldn't go in and say, I want to watch this movie, guys. But while you're tripping, if everybody's like looking at each other, not sure what to do, then you don't have to think about it. You already thought about it while you were sober, and you can say, hey, I want to watch this movie, and I know it's on Hulu, and I know we're subscribed to it, or whatever it is, because it's also terrible to like try to find it. You just don't want to do that stuff when you're on acid. You just want to watch the movie, okay? Acid is not like these other party drugs. It's not like weed where you just want to chill out and enjoy yourself. It's not like alcohol or cocaine or Molly where you're just gonna go around and have fun and you don't have to worry about it. With acid, I honestly, in my experience, like there can be and have been times where we've all just kind of sat around looking at each other being like, so what do we do now? And that's a terrible self-conscious feeling on acid. Like, also, don't cook, order food. Like, don't do that stuff. Weird side note, don't wear your contacts, wear your glasses. It would be really scary, the idea of having contacts in my eyes when I'm on acid, and the idea of having to like take them out while I'm on acid is like really scary. So I always just have my glasses on as a side note. The next little chunk of things I want to talk about is like really harm reduction. Like, keep your personal items safe. Just in general, if you've done drugs at all, you know, like, don't bring your phone out, don't bring your keys out, don't bring your wallet out. Before you even take acid, take your phone, keys, wallet, put them in a purse, and put them somewhere out of the way and safe. And honestly, if you can avoid it, do not touch it. I've had somebody lose their keys on acid. It was a terrible experience the next morning. And it's like, you can't even use your phone when you're on acid. You can't see shit. I remember everything's moving. You don't know what the fuck's going on with your phone. So just keep those items safe. That's another thing. Do not drive. Do not drive on acid. I don't care how experienced somebody is. Like, yeah, we've all drank and drive. We've all smoked weed and drive. Like, let's just be honest. But there is no reason to do acid and drive. It's really weird. Inertia does not feel like inertia, and you really, like, at least for me, I feel like I'm going that fast. I'm like, oh my god. I feel like, especially with a lot of the men on here, is like, especially just in general, that like I feel like a lot of drugs are spoken to through from a much more masculine perspective. I feel like for women, psychedelic experiences are very different, because I feel like we already know empathy. We never even had an ego to have an ego death in the first place. Like, psychedelics are, I think, much closer to where women are at anyways. It's stereotypically, I'm stereotyping here. That's why I'm like, this is a girl's guide, but I mean, there will be men, so I'm not saying it like they're not, but I'm saying in general, people really emphasize this idea of like deep spiritual insights when you're on acid and realizing who you are and having an ego death. And yes, you do get spiritual insights. Like, there is a lot of understanding. Oh, this is how I feel about this person. This is why this person does this. Oh my God, I'm able to like read this person a lot more. I'm able to read myself a lot more. I have even more questions about life. Why do I want to do this? Like, yes, that is all what is brought up. But I will say that is a very, like, these are all very like feminine, I'll say like questions. Like these are questions that a lot of women have asked themselves from a young age. You know, I really expected when I first went into taking acid, I thought it was going to be the most ultra spiritual experience ever. And I was going to be a completely evolved, changed person afterwards. And while that's partially true, it's partially true for different reasons than you think it is. I've never experienced an ego death on acid. I've never been around somebody that's experienced an ego death on acid. You know, if you've seen that TikTok circulating around where it's like that guy who's like, I realized that I didn't learn empathy until I was 18 because I grew up with a bunch of brothers and I never was around females. Like, that guy will experience an ego death if he takes acid. Yeah, he's gonna experience the stereotypical fucking thing that every guy talks about when they take acid. But you and me, people that are into astrology, people that are more spiritual, I'm just assuming, no, probably not. Like, yes, we will have much more spiritual insights, but it's not going to be as extreme in that way. I don't think, at least. I was almost like disappointed. I remember being very disappointed the day after I took acid because I just had way too large of expectations. I expected it to do just too much for me. And so I'm just trying to, I guess, lower your expectations a little bit when it comes to that kind of stuff, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't come up, because it does. If you don't want to take acid because you're scared of an ego death, first of all, if that's what you're scared of, that's even more of a reason to take it, because you probably need a little bit of a reality check on yourself. But also, if you're like a girly girl who grew up around a bunch of girls and was always asking yourself why and never got to stand up for themselves, like, Coke is going to be weirder for you because you're going to want to talk the whole time and you're going to have an ego. Acid is going to feel a little bit more familiar and a little bit closer to you, actually. Now let's talk about trip sitting. So when I did my first trip, I did not have a trip sitter, and thank God. Looking back, oh my God, I would never have ever wanted somebody to be trip sitting while I was taking acid for the first time, because you're just going to feel like they're judging you. You're going to be judging them because they're not on your wavelength. Like, why aren't you doing this? You're going to think that they're judging you because you're going to be all self-conscious. Am I acting different? Am I doing it? Like, I would never want a trip sitter the first time I did acid. Oh, should I be a trip sitter before I've ever done it? I don't think so. Like, trip sitting is fine. It's fine. But I would never do it with I would never want a trip sitter. If it was my first time, I would want everybody to be in it together. Just another side note, wear something comfortable. This is not the time for high heels. This is not the time for shorts that give you wedgies. This is not the time for wearing something that's gonna just uncomfortable. Makeup or no makeup, it doesn't matter. Like, the way hippies dress in the 70s is because, like, that's the kind of way you want to feel and way you want to, like, look while you're on acid like that. You want to feel like you can move, you know? Another side note, and you hear this a lot, is people say cover your mirrors. I did cover my mirrors almost every time I did acid, and I'm glad, especially the first time you do acid, I would really, really recommend covering your mirrors, just because that's something that you just don't need to fall into on accident. You can really get stuck and you can get lost in a mirror, you know, just like how your whole trip can be. This fly is really driving me up a fucking wall. If you have any body dysmorphia, any sort of self-consciousness, anything like that, just cover your mirrors. It's easier to cover them and take the covers down if you don't feel like you need them than it is to try and cover them while you're on acid. That's like impossible, and that's like weird because then you'll just get stuck on it. I have had friends that are like, I do acid by myself and I stare at myself in the mirror for 12 hours. But they're, you know, people with crazy stuff in their 12th house. And so it's not like it's completely detrimental to you. I think this is just a note where it's better safe than sorry. And now that you know that it's a good idea to cover your mirrors or just not look in a mirror, I would just avoid it. Again, this isn't the hardest and fastest rule. Like, hard and fast rule, don't dose somebody without them knowing. Hard and fast and true every time. Soft word of advice is to cover your mirrors. The last thing that I want to say is that acid is one of the cheapest drugs out there. It is, like, I remember when I got my acid, it's like $10 for a tab. I've gotten a bunch of acid for free before because people will just hand it out, dude. Like, it's literally like candy. You can get it for $5, $10, $15. It is not like other drugs where people will hoard it. You have to pay for it. You have to buy it. No, people will give you acid. That's why I say, like, acid will find you. You don't have to find it because it's so cheap. It's so readily available. And it's because it is so hard to abuse. Like, it is, obviously you can get addicted to anything. Obviously you can get hooked on anything, but acid is just something that's so hard to get hooked on. I have turned it down before. I've turned down almost every drug because, like I said, I don't have an addictive personality. I only do things when I want to do them. And it really does mess with your brain a lot, that there really should be time that you take in between doing it. Like, it is something that I would really only advise doing 1 to 3 times a year, but doing it any more than 3 times can really mess with your brain. Like, I know people will be like, oh, balloons, and there you have holes in your brain, and like, it's not like that, but it messes with things in a lot of a deeper way. It's not like, I can't do math no more. It's not like that. It's like, there's this thing that I call trip brain. I kind of refer to it a lot, but I see people that take acid too much and they kind of get what I call trip brain, like permanent trip brain, because when you're taking acid, you get trip brain, and it kind of makes it so everything goes into itself. Everything circles into yourself. You almost get to a point and then you don't because it circles, and you almost get to a point but then you lose your train of thought, and you almost get somewhere but then you don't because it keeps going. Like, that's kind of why it's called a trip, because you're like, I'm there, then there, and then I'm there, and then I'm there, and you never fall flat. You never get to the point. You never get to the final destination. When I know people that have done acid too much, or I can tell somebody's done acid too much, or when I was doing acid, honestly, too much, that I found myself on a little bit of trip brain. And it was really scary. I'm gonna be real with you, because I found myself losing an interest in things. I found it really hard to find a purpose to do anything. I found it really hard to set a strong end goal. I found it really hard to focus on anything, to care about anything. Even like my love for astrology kind of got lost a little because it all went into itself, and it all stopped being separated by the 12 signs, and it all went into itself, which is good for a certain period of time. But then when you're in permanent trip brain, it's just hard to distinguish things. It's hard to, like I said, being hard to distinguish things makes it hard to set goals, makes it hard to even talk. Like, you can tell you're talking to somebody with trip brain because they're always almost getting to their point, but they never quite do, and they talk in circles. And I'm glad I haven't done it in 2 years, because I needed to kind of, like, I feel like that's a lot of the reason why I've been starting to be on social media more, because I have more concrete things that I want to say now, whereas before, when I was doing acid a little bit too much, and again, so many people have done it so many more times than me, that's not what I'm trying to say. So I'm definitely not like the ultimate end all be all expert, but I feel like because I am 2 years away from the last time I did acid, it allows me to talk about it in a more concrete way. I wouldn't be able to make this video like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, because I was still trying to separate myself from that a little bit. And so I definitely don't regret doing acid at all, but I would never ever do it more than, honestly now, I would never do it more than once a year, maybe 2 times a year at most. You just need time in between each trip to work yourself up to having enough to think about in the trip. If you do acid so close together, you don't have as many places to go to, if that makes sense. And that's what creates that scary endless cycle that you can find yourself being in. I do think that with acid, more than any other drug, it's like there's a club of people that have done it and there's a club of people that haven't. And it's really obvious when people have not done acid. I really think that when you do acid, you are much more aligned with your purpose. You know much more what you actually want out of your life individualistically, and you won't settle for doing something that you don't love. You won't settle for being something you don't want to be. And I think that's what's really beautiful about acid. And you can see that people that have done it even just once are a little less of a follower and a little bit more of a leader in their own life. And that doesn't mean that if you do acid once, you'll never follow the traditional route. Like, I knew somebody that was very traditional, followed a very traditional route, and did acid once when they were younger, but they feel much more of a leader in that traditional route, because you can tell that's actually what they really want to do, and that they're actually much more aligned with it, and they have tested it, and that's really them. And I do think acid is something that I fear saying everybody should do once, but I do think most people should do once. And I don't think you need to do it more than twice. I don't think anybody needs to do it more than twice. After twice, you're just doing it for funsies. But I do think it is something that is really important to do once or twice in your life to help you align yourself with your path. And it won't be as obvious as like you're on acid and you're like, I get an insight as this is what I want to do. but it's just like your brain shifts. I don't know how else to say it. You enter society in a different way afterwards. Like, I just can't explain it any other way than you become a leader in your life much more than a follower. It does take you to a very different dimension, and it does kind of unlock a lot of secrets, especially the first time that you're doing it, and nobody can explain it to you except for you. And so if you've watched this video and you're still curious about it, you just need to do it. And if acid found you, it found you for a reason, and you should just do it, honestly. Now, obviously, you know, be aware of your previous mental health conditions and all that sort of stuff. I think acid is a really cool drug. However, I do think it's overrated, and I do think it's overhyped. And I think a lot of that has to do with men that have taken it that like radicalize it because they've never had like a spiritual thought in their entire life. So if you're somebody who has spiritual thought naturally, it'll be a lot closer to you than you realize, but it'll still be very helpful. So don't be so scared of it, but treat it with respect. You need to treat acid with respect. You need to treat the time that you do it with respect, and just be aware going into it that it doesn't do any of the work for you. Acid does none of the work for you. It is not like other drugs where you're gonna experience this no matter what. You're gonna go through this no matter what, whether you like it or not. Acid does not do that. You have to do it for it. It is simply a slight conduit. So let me know your experiences with acid and LSD in the comments. I'd love to know them. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope this kind of answers some questions that you have, helps you better prepare yourself for your first trip, and helps dispel some maybe myths about what LSD and acid is. I would say if I were to rate acid out of 10, I would give it an 8.5. I would say acid is an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any tips that I didn't mention, I would love for you to leave them down below for future people watching this video. But yeah, all right, thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye.